Доброго времени суток всем участникам нашего марафона
Good
удивительного,
morning, all the
посвященного чтению
participants of this
священных писаний,
marathon
и также он
connected with the reading of
посвящен на благо всего мира.
scriptures. This
Мы
marathon
изучаем
is
священное
dedicated to
писание,
the benefit
древних
of all the
ветвь,
world. We are studying the
Bhagavad-Gita или песнь
ancient
Бога, или
scriptures,
этот разговор
this
Бога со
song
своим
of God, the
возлюбленным
Bhagavad-Gita,
учеником,
the
другом,
Krishna who speaks with his disciple,
одновременно.
who is his friend and
Ведет
at the
беседу
same time a
Господь,
cousin, and
отвечая на вопросы своего ученика.
the
И
Lord
мы прочитали первую
answered the
главу,
questions
вошли
of
во
his
вторую,
disciple.
и сейчас как раз
We finish
тот
with the
момент,
first chapter,
когда
and now
Господь будет
this is a
отвечать ему на
crucial
вопросы
moment when
относительно
the
его проблемы,
Lord will
главная проблема,
answer the
почему так
questions on
Арджуна
his
переживает за то, что сейчас ему
questions that
придется вступить в
the
сражение,
main question of Arjuna. Now
и
he
там на той
have to
стороне его
take part in
родственники,
the
он
battle.
переживает,
On the other side
как
is
бы это ни
his
получилось
relatives,
нарушением
and he's
закона религии.
disturbed how maybe it will
Почему так
be
происходит, почему он в
the
таком отчаянии просто просит
break of the law,
Господа Кришну стать его
and
духовным учителем
he
и
asked
направлять его.
Krishna to guide him to become his spiritual
Давайте мы
master.
продолжим, произнесем сначала
Let's
благоприятные молитвы.
continue and pray.
Ом намо Бхагавате Васудевая. Ом намо Бхагавате Васудевая. Ом намо Бхагавате Васудевая. Шримад Бхагавад-Гита, как она есть,
Bhagavad-Gita As It Is, Chapter 2, contents of the Gita summarized. The text 11.
Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Ashocyan Anvashochastvam Pragyavadamscha Bhashase Gatasun Agatasumscha Nanusho-chanti Panditaha.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, while speaking learned words, you are warning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. The Lord at once took the position of the teacher and chastised the student, calling him indirectly a fool. The Lord said, you are talking like a learned man, but you do not know that one who is learned, one who knows what is body and what is soul, does not lament for any stage of the body, neither in the living nor in the dead condition. As explained in later chapters, it will be clear that knowledge means to know matter and spirit and the control of both. Arjuna argued that religious principles should be given more importance than politics or sociology. But he did not know that knowledge of matter, soul, and the supreme is even more important than religious formularies. And because he was lacking in the knowledge, he should not have posed himself as a very learned man. As he didn't happen to be a very learned man, he was consequently lamenting for something which was unworthy of lamentation. The body is born and is destined to be vanquished today or tomorrow. Therefore, the body is not as important as the soul. One who knows this is actually learned, and for him there is no cause for lamentation, regardless of the condition of the material body. Text 12.
Natvevaham jatuni nasam natvam nime janadhipa nachaiva na bhavishyama sarveva yamatah param.
Never was there a time when I did not exist, no you, nor all these kings. In the future shall any of us cease to be. The purport of Srila Prabhupada. In the Vedas, in the Kada Upanishad as well as in the Shvetashvara Upanishad, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the maintainer of the innumerable living entities in terms of their different situations according to individual work and reaction of work. That Supreme Personality of Godhead is also, by His plenary portions, alive in the heart of every living entity. Only saintly parents who can see, within and without, the same Supreme Lord can actually attain to perfect and eternal peace.
Tam atmaskham ye nupashyanti dhiras tisham shanti shashvati netaresham. Katha Upanishad 2.2.13.
The same Vedic truth given to Arjuna is given to all persons in the world who put themselves as very learned, but factually have but a poor fund of knowledge. The Lord says clearly that He Himself, Arjuna, and all the kings who are assembled on the battlefield are eternally individual beings, and that the Lord is eternally the maintainer of the individual living entities, both in their conditioned and in their liberated situation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Supreme Individual Person, and Arjuna, the Lord's eternal associate, and all the kings assembled there are individual eternal persons. It is not that they did not exist as individuals in the past, and it is not that they will not remain eternal persons. Their individuality existed in the past, and their individuality will continue in the future without interruption. Therefore, there is no cause for limitation for anyone. The Mayavadi theory that after liberation the individual soul separated by the covering of Maya or illusion will merge into the impersonal Brahman and lose its individual existence is not supported herein by Lord Krishna, the Supreme Authority. Nor is the theory that we only think of individuality in the conditioned state supported herein. Krishna clearly says herein that in the future also the individuality of the Lord and others, as it is confirmed in the Upanishads, will continue eternally. This statement of Krishna's is authoritative because Krishna cannot be subject to illusion. If individuality were not a fact, then Krishna would not have stressed it so much even for the future. The Mayavadi may argue the individuality spoken of by Krishna is not spiritual, but material. Even accepting the argument that the individuality is material, then how can one distinguish Krishna's individuality? Krishna affirms his individuality in the past and confirms his individuality in the future also. He has confirmed his individuality in many ways, and impersonal Brahman has been declared to be subordinate to him. Krishna has maintained spiritual individuality all along. If he is accepted as an ordinary conditioned soul in the individual consciousness, then his Bhagavad-Gita has no value as authoritative scripture. And common man will owe the four defects of human frailty is unable to teach that which is worth hearing. The Gita is above such literature. No mundane book compares with the Bhagavad-Gita. When one accepts Krishna as an ordinary man, the Gita loses all importance. The Mayavadi argues that the plurality mentioned in this verse is conventional and that it refers to the body. But previous to this verse, such a bodily conception is already condemned. After condemning the bodily conception of the living entities, how was it possible for Krishna to place a conventional proposition on the body again? Therefore, individuality is maintained on spiritual grounds and is thus confirmed by great acharyas like Sri Ramanuja and others. It is clearly mentioned in many places in the Gita that this spiritual individuality is understood by those who are devotees of the Lord. Those who are envious of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of God have no bona fide access to the great literature. The non-devotee's approach to the teachings of the Gita is something like that of a bee licking on a bottle of honey. One cannot have a taste of honey unless one opens the bottle. Similarly, the mysticism of the Bhagavad-Gita can be understood only by devotees, and no one else can taste it, as it is stated in the first chapter of the book. Nor can the Gita be touched by persons who envy the very existence of the Lord. Therefore, the Mayavadi explanation of the Gita is the most misleading presentation of the whole truth. Lord Chaitanya has forbidden us to read commentations made by the Mayavadis and warns that one who takes to such an understanding of the Mayavadi philosophies loses all power to understand the real mystery of the Gita. If individuality refers to the empirical universe, then there is no need of teaching by the Lord. The plurality of the individual soul and of the Lord is an eternal fact, and it is confirmed by the Vedas as above mentioned. Text number 13. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. Since every living entity is an individual soul, each is changing his body every moment, manifesting sometimes as a child, sometimes as a youth, and sometimes as an old man. Yet the same spirit soul is there and does not undergo any change. This individual soul finally changes the body at death, transmigrates to another body. And since it is sure to have another body in the next birth, either material or spiritual, there was no cause for lamentation by Arjuna on account of death, neither for Bhishma nor for Drona, for whom he was so much concerned. Rather, he should rejoice for their changing bodies from old to new one, thereby rejuvenating their energy. Such changes of body account for varieties of enjoyment or suffering according to one's work in life. So Bhishma and Drona, being noble souls, were surely going to have spiritual bodies in the next life, or at least life in heavenly bodies for superior enjoyment of material existence. So in either case, there was no cause of lamentation. Any man who has perfect knowledge of the constitution of the individual soul, the super soul and nature, both material and spiritual, is called a dhira, or a most sober man. Such a man is never deluded by the change of the bodies. The Mayavadi theory of oneness of the spirit soul cannot be entertained on the ground that the spirit soul cannot be cut into pieces as a fragmental portion. Such cutting into different individual souls would make the supreme cleavable or changeable against the principles of the supreme souls being unchangeable. As confirmed in the Gita, the fragmental portions of the Supreme exist eternally, Sanatana and Kshara, that is, and they have a tendency to fall down into material nature. These fragmental portions are eternally so, and even after liberation, the individual soul remains the same fragmental. But once liberated, he lives an eternal life in bliss and knowledge with the personality of Godhead. The theory of reflection can be applied to the super soul who is present in each and every individual body and is known as Paramatman. He is different from the individual living entity. When the sky is reflected in water, the reflection represents both the sun and the moon, and the stars also. The stars can be compared to the living entities and the sun or the moon to the Supreme Lord. The individual fragmental spirit soul is represented by Arjuna, and the Supreme Soul is the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna. They are not on the same level, as it will be apparent in the beginning of the first chapter. If Arjuna is on the same level with Krishna, and Krishna is not superior to Arjuna, then the relationship of instructor and instructed becomes meaningless. If both of them are deluded by the illusory energy Maya, then there is no need of one being the instructor and the other the instructed. Such instruction would be useless because in the clutches of Maya no one can be an authoritative instructor. Under the circumstances, it is admitted that Lord Krishna is a Supreme Lord, superior in position to the living entity, Arjuna, who is a forgetful soul deluded by Maya. Text number 14. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, or sign of Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. The purport of Srila Prabhupada. In the proper discharge of duty, one has to learn to tolerate non-permanent appearances and disappearances of happiness and distress. According to Vedic injunction, one has to take his bath early in the morning, even during the month of Magha, January-February. It is very cold at that time, but in spite of that, a man who abides by religious principles doesn't hesitate to take his bath. Similarly, a woman doesn't hesitate to cook in the kitchen in the month of May and June, the hottest part of summer season. One has to execute his duty in spite of petty inconveniences. Similarly to fight in the religious principles of the Kshatriyas, and also one has to fight with some friend or relative, one should not deviate from his prescribed duty. One has to follow the prescribed rules and regulations of religious principles in order to rise up to the platform of knowledge, because by knowledge and devotion only can one liberate him from the clutches of my illusion. The two different names of addresses given to Arjuna are also significant. To address him as a Kaunteya signifies his great blood relations from his mother's side, and to address him as a Bharata signifies his greatness from his father's side. From both sides he is supposed to have a great heritage. A great heritage brings responsibility in the matter of the proper discharge of duties, therefore he cannot avoid fighting. Text 15. O best among men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation. The purport of Srila Prabhupada: anyone who is steady in his determination for the advanced stage of spiritual realization and can equally tolerate their own sorts of distress and happiness is certainly a person eligible for liberation. In the Varnashrama institution, the fourth stage of life, namely the renowned Soda, sannyasa, is a painstaking situation. But one who is serious about making his life perfect surely adopt the sannyasa order of life in spite of all difficulties. The difficulties usually arise from having to sever family relationships, to give up the connection of wife and children. But if anyone is able to tolerate such difficulties, surely his path to spiritual realization is complete. Similarly, in Arjuna's discharge of duties as a kshatriya, he is advised to persevere, even if it is difficult to fight with his family members or similarly beloved persons. Lord Chaitanya took sannyasa at the age of 24, and his dependents, young wife as well as old mother, had no one else to look after them. Yet for a higher course he took sannyasa and was steady in the discharge of higher duties. That is a way of achieving liberation from material bondage. Text number 16. Those who are serious of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent, the material body, there is no endurance, and of the eternal, the soul, there is no change. This they have concluded by studying the nature of birth. Purport of God. There is no endurance of the changing body. That the body is changing every moment by the actions of reactions of the different cells is admitted by modern medical science. And thus growth and old age are taking place in the body. But the spirit soul exists permanently, remaining the same despite all changes of the body and the mind. That is the difference between matter and spirit. By nature, the body is ever-changing, and the soul is eternal. This conclusion is established by all classes of seers of truth, both impersonalists and personalists. In the Vishnu Purana 2.12.38, that Vishnu and his abodes all have self-illuminated spiritual existence. The words existent and non-existence refers only to spirit and matter. That is the version of all seers of the truth. This is the beginning of the instruction by the Lord to the living entities who are bewildered by the influence of ignorance. Removal of ignorance involves the re-establishment of the eternal relationship between the worshipper and the worshipable, and the consequent understanding of the difference between the part and parcel living entities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can understand the nature of the Supreme by thorough study of oneself. The difference between oneself and the Supreme Being understood as a relationship between the part and the whole. In the Vedanta Sutras, as well as in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Supreme has been accepted as the origin of all emanations. Such emanations are experienced by superior and inferior natural sequences. The living entities belong to the superior nature, as it will be revealed in the 7th chapter, although there is no difference between the energy and the energetic. The energetic is accepted as the supreme, and the energy or nature is accepted as a subordinate. The living entities, therefore, are always subordinate to the Supreme Lord, as in the case of the master and the servant, or the teacher and the taught. Such clear knowledge is impossible to understand under the spell of ignorance, and to drive away such ignorance the Lord teaches the Bhagavad-Gita for the enlightenment of all living entities for all time. Text 17. That which pervades the entire body you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul, the puppet of Srila Prabhupada. This verse more clearly explains the real nature of the soul, which is spread all over the body. Anyone can understand all over the body. It is consciousness. Everyone is conscious of the pains and pleasures of the body in parts or as a whole. This spreading of consciousness is limited within one's own body. The pains and pleasures of one body are unknown to another. Therefore, each and every body is the embodiment of the individual soul, and the symptom of the soul's presence is perceived as individual consciousness. This soul is described as 1/10,000th part of the upper portion of the hair-pointed size. The Shvetashvara Upanishad 5.9 confirms this. When the upper point of a hair is divided into 100 parts, and again each of such parts is further divided into 100 parts, each such part is a measurement of the dimension of the spirit soul. Similarly, the same version is stated. There are innumerable particles of spiritual atoms which are measured as 1/10,000th of the upper portion of the hair. Therefore, the individual particles of spirit soul is a spiritual atom smaller than the material atoms, and such atoms are innumerable. This very small spiritual spark is the basic principles of the material body, and the influence of such a spiritual spark is spread all over the body as the influence of the active principle of some medicine spread throughout the body. This current of the spirit soul is felt all over the body as consciousness, and that is the proof of the presence of the soul. Any layman can understand that the material body minus consciousness is a dead body, and this consciousness cannot be revived in the body by any means of the material administration. Therefore, consciousness is not due to any amount of material combination, but to the spirit soul. In the Mundaka Upanishad 3.1.9, as the measurement of the atomic spirit soul is further explained.
Chitam sarvam otam prajanam yasmin vishudhe vibhavat yeshatma.
The soul is atomic in size and can be perceived by perfect intelligence. This atomic soul is floating in the 5 kinds of air: prana, apana, vyana, samana, and udana. Is situated within the heart and spreads its influence all over the body of the embodied living entities. When the soul is purified from the contamination of the 5 kinds of material air, its spiritual influence is exhibited. The Hatha Yoga system is meant for controlling the 5 kinds of air, encircling the pure soul by different kinds of sitting postures, not for any material profit, but for liberation of the minute soul from the entanglement of the material atmosphere. So the constitution of the atomic soul is admitted in all Vedic literatures and in the practical experience of any sane man. Only the insane man can think of this atomic soul as all-pervading Vishnu Tattva. The influence of the atomic soul can be spread all over a particular body. According to the Mundaka Upanishad, this atomic soul is situated in the heart of every living entity. And because the measurement of the atomic soul is beyond the power of appreciation of the material scientists, some of them assert foolishly that there is no soul. The individual atomic soul is definitely there in the heart along with the supersoul, and thus all the energies of the bodily movement are emanating from this part of the body. The corpuscles which carry the oxygen from the lungs get the energy from the soul. When the soul passes away from this position, the activity of the body of the blood generating fusion ceases. Medical science accepts the importance of the red corpuscles, but it cannot ascertain that the source of the energy is the soul. Medical science, however, does admit that the heart is the seat of the energy of the body, of all energies of the body. Such atomic particles of the spirit whole are compared to the sunshine molecules. In the sunshine there are innumerable radiant molecules. Similar as the fragmental parts of the Supreme Lord are atomic sparks of the rays of the Supreme Lord, called by the name Prabha, or superior energy. So whether one follows Vedic knowledge or modern science, one cannot deny the existence of the spirit soul in the body, and the science of the soul is explicitly described in the Bhagavad-Gita by the personality of Godhead himself. Text 18. The material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is sure to come to an end. Therefore fight, O descendant of Bharata. The purport of Srila Prabhupada. The material body is perishable by nature. It may perish immediately, or it may do so after 100 years. It is a question of time only. There is no change of maintaining it indefinitely. But the spirit soul is no minute that it cannot even be seen by an enemy, to say nothing of being killed. As mentioned in the previous verse, it is so small that no one can have any idea how to measure its dimension. So from both viewpoints there is no cause of lamentation, because the living entity as he is cannot be killed, nor can the material body be saved for any length of time or permanently protected. Some minute particle of the whole spirit acquires this material body according to his work, and therefore observance of religious principles should be utilized. In the Vedanta Sutras, the living entity is qualified as light, because he is part and parcel of the Supreme Light. As sunlight maintains the entire universe, so the light of the soul maintains this material body. As soon as the spirit soul is out of the material body, the body begins to decompose. Therefore, it is the spirit soul which maintains this body. The body itself is unimportant. Arjuna was advised to fight and not sacrifice the cause of the religion for material body consideration.
Принципами религии во имя сохранения материальных отношений, основанных. Текст 19.
Text 19. Neither he who thinks the living entity is a slayer, nor he who thinks its slaying is in knowledge. For the self slays no not know is slain. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. When an embodied living entity is hurt by fatal weapons, it is to be known that the living entity within the body is not killed. The spirit soul is so small that it is impossible to kill him by any material weapon, as will be evident from subsequent verses. Nor is the living entity killable because of the spiritual constitution. What is killed or is supposed to be killed is the body only. This, however, does not at all encourage killing of the body. The Vedic injunction is Himshayat Sarva Bhutani, never commit violence to anyone. Nor does understanding that the living entity is not killed encourage animal slaughter. Killing the body of anyone without authority is abominable and is punishable by the law of the state as well as by the law of the Lord. Arjuna, however, is being engaged in killing for the principle of religion and not whimsically. Text 20.
Najayate mriyate va kadachin nayam utva bhavitavana bhuyaha ajo nityakshashvato yam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire.
For the soul, there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever-existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. Qualitatively, the small atomic fragmental part of the Supreme Spirit is one with the Supreme. He undergoes no changes like the body. Sometimes the soul is called a steady or kutastram. The body is subject to 6 kinds of transformation. It takes its birth from the womb of the mother's body, remains for some time, grows, produces some effects, gradually dwindles, and at last vanishes into oblivion. The soul, however, does not go through such changes. The soul is not born, but because he takes on a material body, the body takes its birth. The soul does not take birth there, and the soul does not die. Anything which has birth also has death. And because the soul has no birth, he therefore has no past, present, or future. He is eternal, ever-existent, and primeval. That is, there is no trace in history of his coming into being. Under the impression of the body, we seek the history of the birth, etc. of the soul. The soul does not at any time become old as the body does. The so-called old man therefore feels himself to be the same spirit as in his childhood or youth. The changes of the body do not affect the soul. The soul doesn't deteriorate like a tree, nor anything material. The soul has no byproduct either. The byproducts of the body, namely children, are also different individual souls, and owing to the body, they appear as children of a particular man. The body develops because of the soul's presence, but the soul has neither offshoots nor change. Therefore, the soul is free from the 6 changes of the body. In the Katha Upanishad 1-18, we also find a similar passage which reads, The meaning and purport of this verse is the same as in the Bhagavad-Gita. But here in this verse there is one special word, vipaschit, which means with knowledge. The soul is full of knowledge, or full always with consciousness. Therefore, consciousness is the symptom of the soul. Even if one does not find the soul within the heart, or where he is situated, one can still understand the presence of the soul simply by the presence of consciousness. Sometimes we do not find the sun in the sky owing to clouds, or for some other reason, but the light of the sun is always there, and we are convinced that it is therefore daytime. As soon as there is a little light in the sky early in the morning, we can understand that the sun is in the sky. Similarly, since there is some consciousness in all bodies, whether man or animal, we can understand the presence of the soul. The consciousness of the soul is, however, different from the consciousness of the Supreme, because the Supreme Consciousness is all knowledge, past, present, and future. The consciousness of the individual soul is prone to be forgetful. When he is forgetful of his real nature, he obtains education and enlightenment from the superior lessons of Krishna. But Krishna is not like the forgetful soul. If so, Krishna's teachings of Bhagavad-Gita would be useless. There are two kinds of souls, namely the minute particle soul Anu-Atma and the super soul Vibhu-Atma. This is also confirmed in the Katha Upanishad 1.2.20 in this way.
Tam akratuh pashyati vita shoko dhatuh prasadan mahimanam atmanaham.
Both the super soul Paramatma and the atomic soul Jivatma are situated on the same tree of the body within the same heart of the living being. And only one who has become free from all material desires as well as limitations can, by the grace of the Supreme, understand the glories of the soul. Krishna is the fountainhead of the super soul, also, as it will be disclosed in the following chapters, and Arjuna is the atomic soul, forgetful of his real nature. Therefore, he requires to be enlightened by Krishna or by his fight representative, the spiritual master. Text 21. O Partha, how can a person who knows that the soul is indestructible, eternal, unborn, and immutable kill anyone or cause anyone to kill? The purport of Srila Prabhupada. Everything has its proper utility. A man who is situated in complete knowledge knows where to apply a thing for its proper utility. Similarly, violence also has its utility, and how to apply violence rests with the person's knowledge. Although the justice of peace and awards capital punishment to a person condemned for murder, the justice of the peace cannot be blamed because he orders violence to another person according to the cause of justice. In Manu Samhita, the law book for mankind, it is supported that the murderer should be condemned to death, so that in his next life he will not have to suffer for the great sin he has committed. Therefore, the king's punishments of hanging and murder is actually beneficial. Similarly, when Krishna orders fighting, it must be concluded that violence is for supreme justice, and that thus Arjuna should follow the instruction, knowing well that such violence committed in the act of fighting for Krishna is not violence at all, because at any rate the man or rather the soul cannot be killed. So for the administration of justice, so-called violence is permitted. a surgical operation is not meant to kill the patient, but to cure him. Therefore, the fighting to be executed by Arjuna at the instruction of Krishna is with full knowledge, so there is no possibility of sinful reaction. Text 22.
Татха шарирани вихая джирнань аньяни самьяти навани дехи.
As a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. Change of the body by the atomic individual soul is an accepted fact. Even the modern scientists who do not believe in the existence of the soul, but at the same time cannot explain the source of energy from the heart, have to accept continuous changes of the body, which appear from childhood to boyhood, and from boyhood to youth, and again from youth to old age. From old age, the change is transferred to another body. This has already been explained in a previous verse, 2:13. Transference of the atomic individual soul to another body is made possible by the grace of the Supersoul. The Supersoul fulfills the desire of the atomic soul as one friend fulfills the desire of another. The Vedas, like the Mundaka Upanishad as well as the Shvetashvara Upanishad, compare the soul and the Supersoul to two friendly birds sitting on the same tree. One of the birds, the individual atomic soul, is eating the fruit of the tree, and the other bird, Krishna, is simply watching his friend. Of these two birds, although they are the same in quality, one is captivated by the fruits of the material tree, while the other is simply witnessing the activities of his friend. Krishna is the witnessing bird, and Arjuna is the eating bird. Although they are friends, one is still the master and the other is the servant. Forgetfulness of this relationship by the atomic soul is the cause of one's changing his position from one tree to another, or from one body to another. The Jiva soul is struggling very hard on the tree of the material body, but as soon as he agrees to accept the other bird as a supreme spiritual master, as Arjuna agreed to do by voluntary surrender to Krishna's for instructions, the subordinate bird immediately becomes free from the limitations. Both the Mundaka Upanishad 3.1.2 and Shvetashvara Upanishad 4.7 confirms this.
Nishaya shochati muhya manaha jushtam yadatyam isham asya mahimanamiti vitashokaha.
Although the two birds are in the same tree, the eating bird is fully engrossed with anxiety and moroseness as the enjoyer of the fruits of the tree. But if in some way or other he turns his face to his friend the Lord and knows his glories, at once the suffering bird becomes free from all anxieties. Arjuna has now turned his face towards his eternal friend Krishna and is understanding the Bhagavad-Gita from him. And thus, hearing from Krishna, he can understand the supreme glories of the Lord and be free from lamentation. Arjuna is advised herewith by the Lord not to lament for the bodily change of his old grandfather and his teacher. He should rather be happy to kill their bodies in the righteous fight, so that they may be cleansed at once of all reactions from various bodily activities. One who lays down his life on the sacrificial altar or in the proper battlefield is at once cleansed of bodily reactions and promoted to a high status of life. So there was no cause for Arjuna's lamentation. Text 23. The soul can never be cut to pieces by any weapon, nor burned by fire, nor moistened by water, nor withered by the wind. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. All kinds of weapons, swords, flame weapons, rain weapons, tornado weapons, etc. are unable to kill the spirit soul. It appears that there were many kinds of weapons made of earth, water, air, ether, etc., in addition to the modern weapons of fire. Even the nuclear weapons of the modern age are classified as fire weapons. But formerly there were other weapons made of all different types of material elements. Fire weapons were counteracted by water weapons, which are now unknown to modern science. Nor do modern science have knowledge of tornado weapons. Nonetheless, the soul can never be cut into pieces, nor annihilated by any number of weapons, regardless of scientific devices. The Mayavadi cannot explain how the individual soul came into existence simply by ignorance and consequently became covered by the illusory energy. Nor was it ever possible to cut the individual souls from the original Supreme Soul. Rather, the individual souls are eternal separated parts of the Supreme Soul. Because they are atomic individual souls, eternally Sanatana, they are prone to be covered by the illusory energy, and thus they become separated from the association of the Supreme Lord, just as the sparks of the fire, also one in quality with the fire, are prone to be extinguished when out of the fire. In the Varaha Purana, the living entities are described as separated parts and parcels of the Supreme. They eternally so according to the Bhagavad-Gita also. So even after being liberated from illusion, the living entity remains a separate identity, as is evident from the teachings of the Lord to Arjuna. Arjuna became liberated by the knowledge received from Krishna, but he never became one with Krishna. Text 24. This individual soul is unbreakable and insoluble and can be neither burned nor dried. He is everlasting, present everywhere, unchangeable, immovable, and eternally the same. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. All these qualifications of the atomic soul definitely prove that the individual soul is eternally the atomic particle of the spirit whole, and he remains the same atom eternally without change. The theory of monism is very difficult to apply in this case, because the individual soul is never expected to become one homogeneously. After liberation from material contamination, the atomic soul may prefer to remain as a spiritual spark in the effulgent rays of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the intelligent souls enter into the spiritual planets to associate with the Personality of Godhead. The word Sarvagata, all-pervading, is significant because there is no doubt that living entities are all over God's creation. They live on the land, in the water, in the air, within the earth, and even within fire. They believe that they are sterilized in fire is not acceptable because it is clearly stated, here that the soul cannot be burned by fire. Therefore, there is no doubt that there are living entities also in the sun planet with suitable bodies to live there. If the sun globe is uninhabited, then the word Sarvagata, living everywhere, becomes meaningless. Text 25. It is said that the soul is invisible, inconceivable, and immutable. Knowing this, you should not grieve for the body. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. As described previously, the magnitude of the soul is so small for our material calculation that he cannot be seen even by the most powerful microscope. Therefore, he is invisible. As far as the soul's existence is concerned, no one can establish his existence experimentally beyond the proof of Shruti, or Vedic wisdom. We have to accept this truth because there is no other source of understanding the existence of the soul, although it is a fact by perception. There are many things we have to accept solely on grounds of superior authority. No one can deny the existence of his father based upon the authority of his mother. There is no source of understanding the identity of the father except by the authority of the mother. Similarly, there is no source of understanding the soul except by studying the Vedas. In other words, the soul is inconceivable by human experimental knowledge. The soul is consciousness and conscious. That also is a statement of the Vedas, and we have to accept that. Unlike the bodily changes, there is no change in the soul. As eternally unchangeable, the soul remains atomic in comparison to the infinite Supreme Soul. The Supreme Soul is infinite, and the atomic soul is infinitesimal. Therefore, the infinitesimal soul, being unchangeable, can never become equal to the infinite soul or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This concept is repeated in the Vedas in different ways just to confirm the stability of the conception of the soul. Repetition of something is necessary in order that we understand the matter thoroughly without error. Text 26. If, however, you think that the soul or the symptoms of life will always be born and die forever, you still have no reason to lament, Almighty Armed. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. There is always a class of philosophers almost akin to the Buddhists who do not believe in the separate soul beyond the body. When Lord Krishna spoke the Bhagavad-Gita, it appears that such philosophers existed, and they were known as the Lokayatikas and Vaibhashikas. Such philosophers maintain that life symptoms take place at a certain material condition of material combination. The modern materialist scientists and materialist philosophers also think similarly. According to them, the body is a combination of physical elements, and at a certain stage the life symptoms develop by interaction of the physical and chemical elements. The science of anthropology is based on this philosophy. Currently, many pseudo-religious, now becoming fashionable in America, are also adhering to this philosophy, as are the nihilistic, non-devotional Buddhist sects. Even if Arjuna did not believe in this existence of the soul as in the Vaibhashika philosophy, there would still have been no cause for lamentation. No one laments the soul of a certain bulk of chemicals and stops discharging his prescribed duty. On the other hand, in the modern science and scientific warfare, so many tons of chemicals are wasted for achieving victory over the enemy. According to the Vaibhashika philosophy, the so-called soul or Atma vanishes along with the deterioration of the body. So in any case, whether Arjuna accepted the Vedic conclusion that there is an atomic soul or he did not believe in the existence of the soul, he had no reason to lament. According to this theory, since there are so many living entities generating out of matter every moment, and so many of them are being vanquished every moment, there is no need to grieve for such incidents. If there were no rebirths for the soul, Arjuna had no reason to be afraid of being affected by sinful reactions due to his killing his grandfathers and teachers. But at the same time, Krishna sarcastically addresses Arjuna as Mahabahu, mighty-armed, because he at least did not accept the theory of the Vaibhashikas, which leaves aside the Vedic wisdom. As a Kshatriya, Arjuna belonged to the Vedic culture, and it behooved him to continue to follow its principles. Text 27.
Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityur dhruvam janmamritasya cha tasmata pariharyerthe na tvam shochitum arhasi.
One who has taken his birth is sure to die, and after death one is sure to take birth again. Therefore, in the unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. One who has to take birth according to one's activities of life, and after finishing one term of activities, one takes birth for the next. In this way, one is going through one cycle of birth and death after another without liberation. This cycle of birth and death does not, however, support unnecessary murder, slaughter, and war. But at the same time, violence and war are inevitable factors in human society for keeping law and order. The battle of Kurukshetra, being the will of the Supreme, was an inevitable event, and to fight for the right cause is the duty of a Kshatriya. Why should he be afraid of aggrieved at the death of his relatives, since he was discharging his proper duty? He did not deserve to break the law, thereby becoming subjected to the reactions of sinful acts of which he was so afraid. By avoiding the discharge of his proper duty, he would not be able to stop the death of his relatives, and he would be degraded due to his selection of the wrong path of action. Text 28.
Avyakta dini bhutani vyakta madhyani bharata avyakta nidhananyeva tatraka paridevana.
All created beings are unmanifest in their beginning, manifest in their interim state, and unmanifest again when annihilated. So what need is there for lamentation? Purport of Srila Prabhupada. Accepting that there are two classes of philosophers, one believing in the existence of the soul and the other not believing in the existence of the soul, there is no cause for lamentation in their case. Non-believers in the existence of the soul are called atheists by followers of the Vedic wisdom. Yet, even if for argument's sake we accept this atheistic theory, there is still no cause for lamentation. Apart from the separate existence of the soul, the material elements remain unmanifested before creation. From this subtle state of non-manifestation comes manifestation. Just as from ether air is generated, from air fire is generated, from fire water is generated, and from water earth becomes manifested. From the earth, many varieties of manifestations take place. Take, for example, a big skyscraper manifested from the earth. When it is dismantled, the manifestation becomes again unmanifested and remains as atoms in their ultimate stage. The law of conservation of energy remains, but in course of time, things are manifested and unmanifested. That is the difference. Then what cause is there for lamentation either in the stage of manifestation or in unmanifestation? Somehow or other, even in the unmanifested stage, things are not lost. Both at the beginning and at the end, all elements remained unmanifested. And only in the middle are they manifested, and this does not make any real material difference. And if we accept the Vedic conclusion as stated in the Bhagavad-Gita that these material bodies are perishable in due course of time, antavanta ime deha, but that the soul is eternal, nitya syokta sharirinah, then we must remember always that the body is like a dress. Therefore, why lament the changing of a dress? The material body has no factual existence in relation to the eternal soul. It is something like a dream. In a dream, we may think of flying in the sky or sitting on a chariot as a king, but when we wake up, we can see that we are neither in the sky nor seated in the chariot. The Vedic wisdom encourages self-realization on the basis of the non-existence of material body. Therefore, in other case, whether one believes in the existence of the soul or one does not believe in the existence of the soul, there is no cause for lamentation for loss of the body. Text 29.
Pashyati kashitenam acharyavat vadati tathaiva chanya ascharyavat chainam anyah shrinoti shrutvaphyenam vedana chaiva kaschit.
Some look on the soul as amazing, some described him as amazing, and some hear of him as amazing, while others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. Since Gita Upanishad is largely based on these principles of the Upanishads, it is not surprising to also find this passage in the Katha Upanishad 1-7.
Shinvantopi bahavoyam navidyu Ascharyo vakta kushalosya labdha Ascharyo gyata kushala nushishtah.
The fact that the atomic soul is within the body of a gigantic animal is the body of a gigantic banyan tree, and also in the microbic germs millions and billions of which occupy only an inch of space, is certainly very amazing. A man with a poor fund of knowledge and men who are not austere cannot understand the wonders of the individual atomic spark of spirit, even though it is explained by the greatest authority of knowledge who imparted lessons even to Brahma, the first living being in the universe. Owing to gross material conceptions of things, most men in the age cannot imagine how such a small particle can become both so great and so small. So men look at the soul proper as wonderful either by constitution or by description. Illusioned by the material energy, people are so engrossed in the subject matters for sense gratification that they have very little time to understand the question of self-understanding, even though it is a fact that without this self-understanding, all activities result in ultimate defeat in the struggle for existence. Perhaps they have no idea that one must think of the soul and thus make a solution to the material miseries. Some people who are inclined to hear about the soul may be attending lectures in good association, but sometimes, owing to ignorance, they are misguided by acceptance of the super-soul and the atomic soul as one without distinction of magnitude. It is very difficult to find a man who perfectly understands the position of the super-soul, the atomic soul, their respective functions and relationships, and all other major and minor details. And it is still more difficult to find a man who has actually derived full benefit from knowledge of the soul, and who is able to describe the position of the soul in different aspects. But if somehow or other one is able to understand the subject matter of the soul, then one's life is successful. The easiest process for understanding the subject matter of soul, however, is to accept the statement of Bhagavad-Gita spoken by the greatest authority, Lord Krishna, without being deviated by other theories. But it also requires a great deal of penance and sacrifice, either in this life or in the previous ones, before one is able to accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna can, however, be known as such by the course mercy of the pure devotee and by no other way. Text 13. O descendant of Bharata, he who dwells in the body can never be slain. Therefore you need not grieve for any living being. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. The Lord now concludes the chapter of instruction on immutable spirit soul. In describing the immortal soul in various ways, Lord Krishna establishes that the soul is immortal and the body is temporary. Therefore, Arjuna as a Kshatriya should not abandon his duty out of fear that his grandfather and teacher Bhishma and Drona will die in the battle. On the authority of Sri Krishna, one has to believe that there is a soul different from the material body, not that there is no such thing as soul, or that living symptoms develop at a certain stage of material maturity resulting from the interaction of the chemicals. So the soul is immortal, violence is not encouraged, but at the time of war it is not discouraged when there is actual need for it. That need must be justified in terms of the sanction of the Lord and not capriciously. Text 31. Considering your specific duty as a kshatriya, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles, and so there is no need for hesitation. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. Out of the 4 orders of social administration, the second order for the matter of good administration is called kshatriya. Kshat means herd. One who gives protection from harm is called kshatriya. Trayate, to give protection. The kshatriyas are trained for killing in the forest. A kshatriya would go into the forest and challenge a tiger face to face and fight with the tiger with his sword. When the tiger was killed, it would be offered the royal order of cremation. This system has been followed even up to the present day by the Kshatriyas kings of Jaipur state. The Kshatriyas are especially trained for challenging or killing because religious violence is sometimes a necessary factor. Therefore, Kshatriyas are never meant for accepting directly the order of sannyasa or renunciation. Non-violence in politics may be a diplomacy, but it is never a fact of principle. In the religious law books,
Yagyeshu Pashavo Brahman Hanyante Satatam Dvijay Samskrita Skila Mantraischa Tepi Svargam Avapnuvan Tsar Kshatri.
In the battlefield, a king or kshatriya, while fighting another king envious of him, is eligible for achieving the heavenly planets after death, as the brahmanas also attain the heavenly planets by sacrificing animals in the sacrificial fire. Therefore, killing on the battlefield on religious principles and killing animals in the sacrificial fire are not at all considered to be acts of violence, because everyone is benefiting the religious principles involved. The animal sacrificed gets a human life immediately without undergoing the gradual evolutionary process from one form to another, and the kshatriyas killed on the battlefield also attain the heavenly planets, as do the brahmanas who attain them by offering sacrifice. There are 2 kinds of swadharmas, specific duties. As long as one is not liberated, one has to perform the duties of his particular body in accordance with religious principles in order to achieve liberation. When one is liberated, one's swadharma, specific duty, becomes spiritual and is not in the material body concept. In the bodily conception of life, there are specific duties for the brahmanas and kshatriyas respectively, and such duties are unavoidable. Swadharma is ordained by the Lord, and this will be clarified in the 4th chapter. On the bodily plane, Swadharma is called Varnashrama Dharma, or man's stepping stone for spiritual understanding. Human civilization begins from the stage of Varnashrama Dharma, specific duties in terms of a specific modes of nature of the body obtained. Discharging one's specific duty in any field of action in accordance with the orders of higher authorities serves to elevate one to a higher status of life. Text 32.
Svargadvaram apavritam Sukhinah Kshatriyah Vardha labhanti yuddham idrisham. O Partha, счастливы те кшатрии,
O Partha, happy are the Kshatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought, opening for them the doors of the heavenly planets.
комментарий.
Purport of Srila Prabhupada.
Как учитель всего мира,
As supreme teacher
Господь
of the
Кришна
world,
осуждает
Lord
поведение
Krishna
Арджуны,
condemns the
который
attitude of
заявил:
Arjuna who
«Я
said,
не вижу
I do
ничего
not find
хорошего в
any
этом
good in
сражении».
this fighting.
Приняв в нем участие, мы обретем
It will
себя
cause perpetual
навечно и
habitation
в
in
аду.
hell.
Слова Арджуны
Such
являются
statement by
следствием
Arjuna
невежества.
reduces he wanted to
При этом
become
безмерие. Однако
in the
кшатрий,
discharge of his
который,
specific
находясь на поле
duty.
боя,
For a kshatriya to be
пытается
on the
избежать
battlefield and to
насилия,
become
видит очень
non-violent
глупо.
is the philosophy of
Парашара
fools.
Смрити,
In the Parasharan's religious
составленном
codes
великим
made by Parashara, the great
Парашарой,
sage and
отцом
father of
Вьясадевы, сказано:
Vyasadeva, it is stated,
«Кшатрио хи праджа ракшан, шастра паних прадандаян, нирджитья пара саньяди, кшитим дхармена палает». Долг
the
кшатрия
Kshatriya's duty
защищать
is to
своих
protect the
подданных от
citizens from
любых
all
бедствий.
kinds of
Для этого
difficulties,
он,
and for the
когда
reason he
необходимо,
has to apply
обязан
violence
применять
in
насилие,
suitable
чтобы
cases
сохранить
for law and
законность и
order.
порядок.
Therefore, he
Поэтому он
has to
должен
conquer the
разгромить армии
soldiers of
враждебных
inimical
ему царей
kings,
и править
and thus
миром
with religious
во всем,
principles he should
руководствуясь
rule
заповедям
over the
религии.
world.
Таким образом, у
Considering
Арджуны не
all
было
aspects,
никаких
Arjuna
причин
had no reason
отказываться от
to
сражения.
refrain from fighting.
Победив врага,
If he should
он будет
conquer his
наслаждаться
enemies, he
царствованием,
would enjoy
а
the
погибнув в
kingdom.
бою,
And even
попадет
if
в
he
рай,
should die in the
врата
battle, he
которого
would be
широко
elevated to the heavenly
открыты
planets,
для него.
whose doors were wide open to him.
И в том и в другом
Fighting
случае,
would be
вступив в
for his
сражение,
benefit
он
in either
только выиграет.
case.
Текст 33.
Text 33.
Адхачит твам имам дхармьям санграмам на каришьяси татах свадхармам киртимча хитва папам авапсьяси. Но, отказавшись
If,
сражаться,
however, you
ты
do not
навлечешь на
perform
себя
your
грех
religious duty
пренебрежения
of fighting,
своим
then you
религиозным
will
долгом, и
certainly
твоя слава воина
incur
померкнет.
sins for neglecting your duties and thus lose your reputation as a fighter.
Комментарий Шрилы Прабхупады.
Purport of Srila Prabhupada.
Арджуна был знаменитым
Arjuna
воином.
was a famous
Он стяжал
fighter
славу
and
в
he attained
сражении
fame
со
by
многими
fighting
великими
many
полубогами,
great demigods,
среди которых был
including
даже
even Lord
Господь Шива.
Shiva.
Вступив
After
в бой с
fighting
Шивой,
and defeating Lord
переодетым в
Shiva in the
охотника и
dress of a
победив
hunter,
его,
Arjuna pleaded the
доставил
Lord and
ему
received as a
огромное
reward a weapon called Pashupata
удовольствие.
Astra.
Награду за это он получил от Шивы оружие, которое называется Пашупата Астра. Все знали
Ab was a
воина,
great warrior.
сам до
Even
начала даровал
Dronacharya gave him
благословение
benedictions and
и вручил
awarded him
чудесное
the
оружие,
special weapon
которым Арджуна
by
мог
which he
убить
could
даже
kill even his
своего
teacher.
учителя. Многие
So he
великие
was
воины, в том
credited
числе
with so
и
many
настоящий
military
отец Арджуны,
certificates from
царь
many
полубогов
authorities,
Индра,
including his
признали его
adopted
боевые
father
заслуги.
Indra, the heavenly
Так что,
king.
оставив поле
But
боя,
if he
Арджуна не
abandoned
только
the
изменит
battle,
долгу
not
кшатрия,
only would be neglected
но и
his
лишится своей
specific
славы,
duty as a kshatriya,
потеряет доброе
but he would
имя
lose all
и
his fame
проложит
and
себе
good name
дорогу в ад.
and thus prepare
Иначе
his
говоря, он
royal
окажется в аду не
road to
потому,
hell.
что будет
In other
сражаться,
words,
а потому, что
he
покинет
would
поле
go to
боя.
hell not by fighting but by withdrawing from battle.
Текст 34.
Text 34.
Акиртим чапи бхутани катхаишьянти те вьяям самбхави тасья чакиртир маранат атиричяте. Во все времена люди будут говорить
People
о
will
твоем
always
позоре,
speak
а для
of your
человека
infamy,
именем бесчестие
and
хуже
for
смерти.
a respectable person dishonor is worse than death.
Разговаривая с Арджуной как
Purport
друг
of Srila
и
Prabhupada.
как философ,
Both as a friend
Господь
and
Кришна
philosopher to Arjuna,
выносит сейчас
Lord Krishna now
окончательное
gives his
суждение
final
о
judgment
решении
regarding
Арджуны
Arjuna's refusal to
уклоняться от
fight.
участия в битве. Арджуна,
The Lord
говорит
says,
Господь,
Arjuna, if you leave the battlefield before the battle even begins, people will call you a coward. And if you think that people may call you bad names, but that you will save your life by fleeing the battlefield, then my advice is that you'd do better to die in the battle. For a respectable man like you, ill fame is worse than death, so you should not flee for fear of your life. Better to die in the battle. That will save you from the ill fame of misusing my friendship and from losing your prestige in society. So the final judgment of the Lord was for Arjuna to die in the battle and not withdraw. Text 35.
Yesham cha tvam bahumato budva yasyasi laghavam.
The great generals who have highly esteemed your name and fame will think that you have left the battlefield out of fear only, and thus they will consider you insignificant. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. Lord Krishna continues to give his verdict to Arjuna. Do not think that the great generals like Duryodhana, Karna, and other contemporaries will think that you have left the battlefield out of compassion for your brothers and grandfather. They will think that you have left out of fear for your life, and thus their high estimation of your personality will go to hell. Text 36.
Nindantastava samarthyam tato dukhataram nukim.
Your enemies will describe you in many unkind words and scorn your abilities. What would be more painful for you? Lord Krishna, Prophet of Srila Prabhupada. Lord Krishna was astonished in the beginning at Arjuna's uncalled for plea for compassion, and he described his compassion as befitting the non-Aryans. Now, in so many words, he has proved his statement against Arjuna's so-called compassion. Text 37.
Tasmat utishtha kaunteya yudhaya krita nishchayaha.
O son of Kunti, either you will be killed on the battlefield and attain the heavenly planets, or you will conquer and enjoy the earthly kingdom. Therefore, get up with determination and fight. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. Even though there was certainty of victory for Arjuna's side, he still had to fight, for even being killed there, he could be elevated into the heavenly planets. Text 38. Do thou fight for the sake of fighting, without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, and you shall never incur sin. Srila Prabhupada purport. Lord Krishna now directly said that Arjuna should fight for the sake for fighting because he desires the battle. There is no consideration of happiness or distress, profit or gain, victory or defeat in the activities of Krishna consciousness. That everything should be performed for the sake of Krishna is transcendental consciousness, so there is no reaction to material activities. He who acts for his own sense gratification, either in the goodness or in passion, is subject to the reaction good or bad, but he who has completely surrendered himself in the activities of Krishna consciousness is no longer obliged to anyone, nor is he a debtor to anyone, as one is in the ordinary course of activities. It is said,
Divarshi bhuta tanrinam pitrinam na kinkaro na yamrni charajan na kinkaro na yamrini charajan sarvatmanaya sharanam sharanyam gato mukundam parihritya kartam.
Anyone who has completely surrendered unto Krishna, Mukundam, giving up all other duties, is no longer a debtor, nor is he obliged to anyone, nor the demigods, nor the sages, nor the people in general, no kinsmen, no humanity, no forefathers. Bhagavatam 11.5.41. That is the indirect hint given by Krishna to Arjuna in this verse, and the matter will be more clearly explained in the following verses. Text 39. Thus far, I have described this knowledge to you through analytic study. Now listen as I explained in its terms of working without fruitive results. O son of Partha, when you act in such knowledge, you can free yourself from the bondage of works. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. According to the Nirukti or the Vedic dictionary, Sankhya means that which describes things in detail, and Sankhya refers to the philosophy which describes the real nature of the soul. And yoga involves controlling the senses. Arjuna's proposal not to fight was based on sense gratification. Forgetting his prime duty, he wanted to cease fighting because he thought that by not killing his relatives and kinsmen, he would be happier than by enjoying the kingdom after conquering his cousin and brothers, the son of Dhritarashtra. In both ways, the basic principles were for sense gratification. Happiness derived from conquering them and happiness derived by seeing kinsmen alive are both on the basis of personal sense gratification, even at the sacrifice of wisdom and duty.
Ради которых он был готов пренебречь своим долгом и поступить вопреки рассудку.
Krishna therefore wanted to explain to Arjuna that by killing the body of his grandfather, he would not be killing the soul proper. And he explained that all individual persons, including the Lord himself, are eternal individuals. They were individuals in the past, they are individuals in the present, and they will continue to remain individuals in the future, because all of us are individual souls eternally. We simply change our body and dress in different manners, but actually we keep our individuality even after liberation from the bondage of material dress. An analytical study of the soul and the body has been very graphically explained by Lord Krishna. And this descriptive knowledge of the soul and the body from different angles of vision has been described here as Sankhya in terms of the Nirukti dictionary. The Sankhya has nothing to do with the Sankhya philosophy of the atheist Kapila. Long before the imposture Kapila's Sankhya, the Sankhya philosophy was expounded in the Srimad Bhagavatam by the true Lord Kapila, the incarnation of Lord Krishna, who explained it to his mother Devahuti. It is clearly explained by him that the Purusha, or the Supreme Lord, is active and that he creates by looking over the Prakriti. This is accepted in the Vedas and in the Gita. The description in the Vedas indicates that the Lord glanced over the Prakriti or nature and impregnated it with atomic individual souls. All these individuals are working in the material world for sense gratification, and under the spell of material energy, they are thinking of being enjoyers. This mentality is dragging to the last point of liberation when the living entity wants to become one with the Lord. This is the last snare of Maya, or sense gratificatory illusion. And it is only after many, many births of such sense gratification activities that the great soul surrenders unto Vasudeva, Lord Krishna, thereby fulfilling the search after the ultimate truth. Arjuna has already accepted Krishna as his spiritual master by surrendering himself unto him. Shishataham Shadimam Tvam Prapanam. Consequently, Krishna will now tell him about the working process in Buddhi Yoga or Karma Yoga, or in other words, the practice of devotional service only for the sense gratification of the Lord. This Buddhi Yoga is clearly explained in the chapter 10, verse 10, has been direct communion with the Lord, who is sitting as Paramatma in everyone's heart. But such communion doesn't take place without devotional service. One who is therefore situated in devotional or transcendental loving service to the Lord, or in other words, in Krishna consciousness, attains to this stage of Buddhi Yoga by the special grace of the Lord. The Lord says, therefore, that only to those who are always engaged in devotional service out of transcendental love does He award the pure knowledge of devotion in love. In that way, the devotee can reach Him easily in the ever-blissful kingdom of God. Thus, the Buddhi Yoga mentioned in this verse is the devotional service of the Lord, and the word Sankhya mentioned herein has nothing to do with the atheistic Sankhya Yoga enunciated by the Kapila. One should not therefore misunderstand that the Sankhya Yoga mentioned herein has any connection with the atheistic Sankhya. Nor did that philosophy have any influence during that time. Nor would Lord Krishna care to mention such godless philosophical speculation. Real Sankhya philosophy is described by Lord Kapila in the Srimad Bhagavatam, but even that Sankhya has nothing to do with the current topics. Here Sankhya means analytical description of the body and the soul. Lord Krishna made an analytical description of the soul just to bring Arjuna to the point of Buddhi Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. Therefore, the Lord Krishna's Sankhya and Lord Kapila's Sankhya, as described in the Bhagavatam, are one and the same. They are all Bhakti Yoga. The Lord Krishna said, therefore, that only the less intelligent class of men make a distinction between Sankhya Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. Sankhya Yoga Pridhak Balach Pravadanti na Panditah. Of course, atheist Sankhya Yoga has nothing to do with Bhakti Yoga. Yet, the unintelligent claim that the atheistic Sankhya Yoga is referred to in the Bhagavad-Gita. One should therefore understand that Buddhi Yoga means to work in Krishna consciousness in the full bliss and knowledge of devotional service. One who works for the satisfaction of the Lord only, however difficult such work may be, is working under the principles of Buddhi Yoga and finds in transcendental bliss. By such transcendental engagement, one achieves all transcendental understanding automatically by the grace of the Lord, and thus his liberation is complete in itself, without his making extraneous endeavors to acquire knowledge. There is much difference between work in Krishna consciousness and work for fruitive result, especially in the matter of sense gratification for achieving results in terms of family or material happiness. Buddhi Yoga is therefore the transcendental quality of the work that we perform. Text 40.
Nihabhi kramma nashosti pratyavayo na vidyate svalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat.
In this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. Activity in Krishna consciousness or acting for the benefit of Krishna without expectation of sense gratification is the highest transcendental quality of work. Even a small beginning of such activity finds no impediment, nor can that small beginning be lost at any stage. Any work begun on the material plane has to be completed, otherwise the whole attempt becomes a failure. But any work begun in Krishna consciousness has a permanent effect, even though not finished. The performer of such work is therefore not at a loss, even if his work in Krishna consciousness is incomplete. One person done in Krishna consciousness bears permanent results, so that the next beginning is from the point of 2%, whereas in material activity without 100% success there is no profit. Jamila performed his duty in some percentage of Krishna consciousness, but the result he enjoyed at the end was 100% by the grace of the Lord. There is a nice verse in this connection in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.5.17. Bhajan apakvodha pate tato yadi yatra kva vabhadram abhuta mushyakim ko vardha apto bhajatam swadharmataha. If someone gives up his occupational duties and works in Krishna consciousness and then falls down on account of not completing his work, what loss is there on his part? And what can one gain if one performs his material activities perfectly? Or as the Christian said, what profit a man if he gained the whole world yet suffered the loss of his eternal soul? Material activities and their results end with the body, but work in Krishna consciousness carries a person again to Krishna consciousness even after the loss of the body. At least one is sure to have a chance in the next life of being born again as a human being, either in the family of a great cultured Brahmana or in a rich aristocratic family. That will give one a further chance for elevation. That is a unique quality of work done in Krishna consciousness. Text 41. Vyavasayatmika budhir ekeha kurunandana bahu shakha hyanantascha buddhayo vyavasayinam. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. A strong praise that by Krishna consciousness one will be elevated to the highest perfection of life is called Vyavasayatmika intelligence. The Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 22:62 states, Krishna bhakti kale sarva karma kritahaya. Faith means unflinching trust in something sublime. When one is engaged in the duties of Krishna consciousness, he needed to act in relationship to the material world with obligation to family, traditions, humanity, or nationality. Fruitive activities are the engagements of one's reactions from past good or bad deeds. When one is awake in Krishna consciousness, he need no longer endeavor for good results in his activities. When one is situated in Krishna consciousness, all activities are on the absolute plane, for they are no longer subject to dualities like good and bad. The highest perfection of Krishna consciousness is renunciation of the material conception of life. This is achieved by progressive Krishna consciousness. The resolute purpose of a person in Krishna consciousness is based on knowledge. Vasudeva Sarvamati Samahatma Durlabha. A person in Krishna consciousness is the rare good soul who knows perfectly that Vasudeva or Krishna is the root of all manifested causes. As by watering the root of a tree, one automatically distributes water to the leaves and branches, so by acting in Krishna consciousness, one can render the highest service to everyone, namely self, family, society, country, humanity, etc. If Krishna is satisfied by one's actions, then everyone will be satisfied. Service in Krishna consciousness is, however, best practiced under the able guidance of a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Krishna, who knows the nature of the student and who can guide him to act in Krishna consciousness. As such, to be well-versed in Krishna consciousness, one has to act firmly and obey the representative of Krishna, and one should accept the instruction of the bona fide spiritual master as one's mission in the life. Srila Vishwanatha instructs us in his famous praise for the spiritual master as follows. By satisfaction of the spiritual master, the Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes satisfied, and by not satisfying the spiritual master, there is no chance for being promoted to the plane of Krishna consciousness. I should therefore meditate and pray for his mercy 3 times a day and offer my respectful obeisances unto him, my spiritual master. The whole process, however, depends on perfect knowledge of the soul beyond the conception of the body, not theoretically but practically. When there is no longer a chance for sense gratification, manifests in fruitive activities. One who is not firmly fixed in mind is diverted by various types of fruitive acts. Text 42-43.
Kamatmanah svargapara janma karma phalapradam kriyavishesha bahulam bhogaishvarya gatim prati.
Men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommended various fruitive elevation to heavenly planets, resulting good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification and opulent life, they said that there is nothing more than this. Srila Prabhupada purpose. People in general are not very intelligent, and due to the ignorance they are most attached to the fruitive activities recommended in the Karma Kanda portions of the Vedas. They do not want anything more
чувственные
than
удовольствия,
sense-gratificatory
наслаждаясь
proposals
жизнью на
for
райских
enjoying life
планетах,
in heaven,
где текут реки хмельного напитка,
where
где много
wine
красивых
and
женщин, и
women
все
are
утопает в
available
роскоши.
and material
В Ведах
opulence
описано
is
множество
very
различных
common. In the
жертвоприношений,
Vedas, many
совершая
sacrifices are
которые
recommended for
человек получает
elevation
право
to the
попасть в
heavenly
рай.
planets, especially
В
the
особенности
Jyotishtoma
это касается
sacrifices. In
жертвоприношений
fact,
Джьотиштома. Говорится,
it
что
is
каждый,
stated that
кто
anyone
желает
desiring
достичь райских
elevation
планет,
to heavenly
должен
planets must
обязательно
perform these
совершить это
sacrifices.
жертвоприношение.
And men with
И
the truly
невежды
fond of
думают,
knowledge
что
think
подобные
that there is the whole purpose of
предписания
Vedic
составляют
wisdom.
суть ведической
It is very
мудрости.
difficult for such
Таким недалеким
inexperienced
людям
persons
очень
to be
трудно обрести
situated in the
решимость,
determined actions
необходимую,
of Krishna
чтобы действовать в
consciousness.
сознании Кришны.
As
Подобно
fools
тому,
are
как глупцы
attached to the flower
срывают
of
цветки
poisonous
ядовитых
trees
деревьев,
without knowing
не
the results
подозревая,
of
чем
such
это чревато,
attractions,
те, кто не
unenlightened
обладает
men
знанием,
are similarly
прельщаются
attracted by such
роскошью
heavenly
райских планет и
opulence and the
доступными
sense enjoyment
там чувственными
thereof.
удовольствиями. В разделе Вед
In the
Карма
Karma
Канда
Kanda
сказано
section of the Vedas, it is said,
Апама
Apama
Сомам
Amrita Abhuma
Абхума и
and
Акшая
Akshayam Havai
Акшаям
Chaturmasya
и Акшаям Хавай Чатурмасья Яджиннаха
Yajna Sukritam
Сукритам
Bhavati.
Бхавати. Тот, кто совершает
In,
Чатурмасью,
in other
на
words,
протяжении
those
4
who perform
месяцев
the four months
налагает на себя
penances
определенные
become
поклонения,
eligible to
получает
drink the
право пить
Somarasa
райский напиток
beverage to
Сомарасу,
become immortal and happy
дарующий
forever.
бессмертие и
Even on this earth,
неприходящее
some
счастье. Даже на
are
земле
very
есть
eager
люди,
to have
которые мечтают
Somarasa to
отведать
become strong
Сомарасы,
and fit to
чтобы
enjoy
стать
sense
крепкими,
gratification.
здоровыми и способными неограниченно наслаждаться жизнью. Они не
Such
верят в
persons
путь
have no faith
освобождения
in
из
liberation from
материального
material
плена
bondage,
и очень
and they are
привязаны к
very
пышным
much
ритуалам,
attached to the pompous
сопровождающим
ceremonies of Vedic
ведические
sacrifices.
жертвоприношения.
They are
Такие люди
generally
рабы своих
sensual
чувств.
and they do
Им
not
не
want
нужно ничего,
anything
кроме
other
райских
than the heavenly
наслаждений.
pleasures of life.
Известно, что на райских планетах
It
есть
is understood
роскошные
that there
сады,
are
называемые
gardens called
Нандана-Канана,
Nanda
где можно
Nakanana, in
приятно
which there is
провести
good
время
opportunity
в обществе
for
прекрасных,
association
как ангелы,
with
женщин
angelic,
и
beautiful women,
волю
and having a
напиться
profuse
Сомарасы.
supply of Somarasa
Такое
wine.
счастье
Such
материально.
bodily
Его
happiness is
источником
certainly
являются
sensual.
органы
Therefore, there are
чувств,
those who are
и есть немало
purely
людей,
attached to such material,
привязанных
temporary
исключительно
happiness
к этому
as lords of the material
приходящему
world.
счастью, которое дает им возможность почувствовать себя хозяевами материального мира. Текст 44. Бхогайшварья прасактанам таяпахрита четасам вьявасьятмика будхих самадхауна видхияте.
Text 44.
Тем, кто
In
слишком
the minds
привязан
of
к
those
чувственным
who are too
удовольствиям,
attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. Samadhi means fixed mind. The Vedic dictionary Nirukti says, Samyak atyate sminatma tattva yathatyam. When the mind is fixed for understanding the self, it is said to be in samadhi. Samadhi is never possible for persons interested in material sense enjoyments and bewildered by temporary things. They are more or less condemned by the process of material energy. In text 45.
Нистрайгуньо Бхаварджуна, Нирдвандво Нитья Саттвастхо, Нир-йога Кшема Атмаван.
The Vedas deal mainly with the subject of the three modes of material nature. O Arjuna, become transcendental to these three modes, be free from all dualities and from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. All material activities involve actions and reactions in the three modes of material nature. They are meant for fruitive results which cause bondage in the material world. The Vedas deal mostly with fruitive activities to gradually elevate the general public from the field of sense gratification to a position on the transcendental plane. Arjuna, as a student and friend of Lord Krishna, is advised to raise himself to the transcendental position of Vedanta philosophy, where is the beginning. There is a Brahma Jigyasa, or questions on the supreme transcendence. All the living entities who are in the material world are struggling very hard for existence. For them, the Lord, after creation of the material world, gave the Vedic wisdom advising how to live and get rid of the material entanglement. When the activities for sense gratification, namely the Karma-kanda chapter, are finished, then the chance of spiritual realization is offered in the form of the Upanishads, which are part of different Vedas, as the Bhagavad-Gita is a part of the fifth Veda, namely the Mahabharata. The Upanishads mark the beginning of transcendental life. As long as the material body exists, there are actions and reactions in the material modes. One who has to learn tolerance in the face of duality, such as happiness and distress, or cold and warmth, and realities, become free from anxieties regarding gain and loss. This transcendental position is achieved in full Krishna consciousness, when one is fully dependent on the good will of Krishna. Text 46.
Yavan artha udapane sarvatah samplutodake tavan sarvishu vedishu brahmanasya vijanatah.
All purposes served by a small well can at once be served by a great reservoir of water. Similarly, all the purposes of the Vedas can be served to one who knows the purpose behind them. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. As the rituals and sacrifices mentioned in the Karma-kanda division of the Vedic literature are meant to encourage gradual development of self-realization. And the purpose of self-realization is clearly stated in the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, 15:15. The purpose of studying the Vedas is to know Lord Krishna, the primeval cause of everything. So self-realization means understanding Krishna and one's eternal relationship with Him. The relationship of the living entities with Krishna is also mentioned in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad-Gita, 15:7. The living entities are parts and parcels of Krishna. Therefore, revival of Krishna consciousness by the individual living entity is the highest perfection stage of Vedic knowledge. This is confirmed in the Srimad Bhagavatam 3:33-7 as follows.
Ahobatashva pachato gariyan yach jihvagre vartate nama tubhyam te pustapaste juhu sasnur arya brahma turnama grinantiyete.
O my Lord, a person who is chanting your holy name, all the born of a low family like that of a Chandala, dog-eater, is situated on the highest platform of self-realization. Such a person must have performed all kinds of penances and sacrifices according to Vedic rituals and studied the Vedic literatures many times after taking his bath in all the holy places of pilgrimage. Such a person is considered to be the best of the Aryan Aryan family. So one must be intelligent enough to understand the purpose of the Vedas, without being attached to the rituals only, and must not desire to be elevated to the heavenly kingdoms for a better quality of sense gratification. It is not possible for the common man in the age to follow all the rules and regulations of the Vedic rituals, nor is it possible to understand all of the Vedanta and the Upanishad thoroughly. It requires much time, energy, knowledge, and resources to execute the purpose of the Vedas. This is hardly possible in this age. The best purpose of Vedic culture is served, however, by chanting the holy names of the Lord as recommended by Lord Chaitanya, the deliverer of all fallen souls. When Lord Chaitanya was asked by a great Vedic scholar, Prakashananda Saraswati, why the Lord was chanting the holy names of the Lord like a sentimentalist instead of studying the feet, so the Lord replied that his spiritual master had found him to be a great fool, and thus asked him to chant the holy name of Lord Krishna. He did so and became ecstatic like a madman. In this age of Kali, most of the population is foolish and not adequately educated to understand Vedanta philosophy. The best purpose of Vedanta philosophy is served by inoffensive chanting the holy name of the Lord. Vedanta is the last word in Vedic wisdom, and the author and knower of the Vedanta philosophy is the Lord Krishna, and the highest Vedantist is the great soul who takes pleasure in chanting the holy name of the Lord. That is the ultimate purpose of all Vedic mysticism.
Text 47.
Text 47. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. There are three considerations here: prescribed duties, capricious work, and inaction. Prescribed duties are activities enjoyed in terms of one's acquired mode of material nature. Capricious work means actions without the sanction of authority, and inaction means not performing one's prescribed duties. The Lord advised Arjuna not be inactive, but that he performs his prescribed duty without being attached to the result. One who is attached to the result of his work is also the cause of. Thus, he is the enjoyer or sufferer of the result of such. As far as prescribed duties are concerned, they can be fitted into three subdivisions, namely routine work, emergency work, and desired activities. Routine work performed as an obligation in terms of the scriptural injunction without desire for results is action in the mode of goodness. Work with the results becomes the cause of bondage. Therefore, such work is not auspicious. Everyone has his proprietary right in regard to prescribed duties, but should act without attachment to the result. Such disinterested obligatory duties doubtlessly lead one to the path of liberation. Arjuna was therefore advised by the Lord to fight as a matter of duty without attachment to the result. His non-participation in the battle is another side of attachment. Such attachment never leads one to the path of salvation. Any attachment, positive or negative, is cause for bondage. Inaction is sinful, therefore fighting as a matter of duty was the only auspicious path of salvation for Arjuna.
на благой путь, ведущий к освобождению, только выполняя свой долг, сражаясь в битве. Текст 48.
Text 48.
Йога стхах куру кармани сангам тяктва дхананджая сидхья сидхьо самобутва сидхья сидхьо самобутва саматвам йога учьяте. О Арджуна, выполняй свой долг
Perform your duty,
невозмутимо,
equiposed, O Arjuna, abandoning all attachment to success or failure. Such equanimity is called yoga. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. Krishna tells Arjuna that he should act in yoga. And what is that yoga? Yoga means to concentrate the mind upon the Supreme by controlling the ever-disturbing senses. And who is the Supreme? Srimad the Lord. And because he himself is telling Arjuna to fight, Arjuna has nothing to do with the results of the fight. Gain or victory are Krishna's concern. Arjuna is simply advised to act according to the dictation of Krishna. The following of Krishna's dictation is real yoga, and this is practiced in the process called Krishna consciousness. By Krishna consciousness only can one give up the sense of proprietorship. One has to become the servant of Krishna or the servant of Krishna. That is the right way to discharge duty in Krishna consciousness, which alone can help one to act in yoga. Arjuna is Kshatriya, and as such he is participating in the Varnashrama Dharma institution. It is said in the Vishnu Purana that in the Varnashrama Dharma the whole aim is to satisfy Vishnu. No one should satisfy himself, as is the rule in the material world, but one should satisfy Krishna. So unless one satisfies Krishna, one cannot correctly observe the principles of Varnashrama Dharma. Indirectly, Arjuna was advised to act as Krishna told him. Text 49. O Dhananjaya, keep all abominable activities far distant by devotional service, and in that consciousness surrender unto the Lord. Those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work are misers. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. One who has actually come to understand one constitutional position as an eternal servitor of the Lord gives up all engagements save working in Krishna consciousness. As already explained, Buddhi Yoga means transcendental loving service to the Lord. Such devotional service is the right course of action for the living entity. Only misers desire to enjoy the fruits of their own work just to be further entangled in the material bondage. Except for work in Krishna consciousness, all activities are abominable because they continually bind the worker to the cycle of birth and death. One should therefore never desire to be the cause of work. Everything should be done in Krishna consciousness for the sake of Krishna. Misers do not know how to utilize the assets of riches which they acquire by good fortune or by hard labor. By good fortune or by hard labor. One should spend all energies working in Krishna consciousness, and that will make one's life successful. Like misers and fortunate persons do not employ their human energy in the service of the Lord. Text 50. A man engaged in devotional service rids himself of both good and bad reaction even in this life. Therefore strive for yoga, which is the art of Purport of Srila Prabhupada. Since time immemorial, each living entity has accumulated the various reactions of his good and bad work. As such, he is continuously ignorant of his real constitutional position. One's ignorance can be removed by the instruction of the Bhagavad-Gita, which teaches one to surrender into Lord Shri Krishna in all respects and become liberated from the chained victimization of action and reaction, birth after birth. Arjuna is therefore advised to act in Krishna consciousness, the purifying process of resultant action. Text 51.
Padam gachhantya namayam.
By thus engaging in devotional service to the Lord, great sages or devotees free themselves from the resultant or work in the material world. In this way, they become free from the cycle of birth and death and attain the state beyond all miseries by going back to Godhead. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. The liberated living entities belong to that place where there are no material miseries. The Bhagavatam 14:58 says, for one who has accepted the abode of the lotus feet of the Lord, who is the shelter of the cosmic manifestation, and as famous as Mukunda, or the material world is like the water contained in a cow footprint, Parampadam, or the place where there are no material miseries or Vaikuntha, is his goal, not the place where there is danger in every step of life. Owing to ignorance, one doesn't know that this material world is a miserable place where there are dangers at every step. Out of ignorance, only less intelligent persons try to adjust to the situation by fruitive activities, thinking that the resultant actions will make them happy. They do not know that no kind of material body anywhere within the universe can give life without misery. The miseries of life, namely birth, death, old age, and disease, are present everywhere within the material world. But one who understands his real constitutional position as the eternal servant of the Lord and thus knows the position of the personality of Godhead engages himself in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Consequently, he becomes qualified to enter into the Vaikuntha's planets, where there is neither material miserable life nor the influence of time and death. To know one's constitutional position means to know also the sublime position of the Lord. One who wrongly thinks that the living entity's position and the Lord's position are on the same level is to be understood to be in darkness and therefore unable to engage himself in devotional service of the Lord. He becomes the Lord himself and thus paves the way for the repetition of birth and death. But one who understands that his position is to serve, transfers himself to the service of the Lord, and at once becomes eligible for Vaikuntha Loka. Service for the cause of the Lord is called Karma Yoga or Buddhi Yoga, or in the plain words, devotional service to the Lord. Text 52.
Yadate moha kalilam buddhirvyati tarishyati tadagantasi nirvedam shrotavyasya shutasya cha.
When your intelligence has passed out of the dense forest of delusion, you shall become indifferent to all that has been heard and all that is to be heard. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. There are many good examples in the lives of the great devotees of the Lord, of those who become indifferent to the rituals of Vedas simply by devotional service to the Lord. When a person factually understands Krishna and his relationship with Krishna, he naturally becomes completely indifferent to the rituals of fruitive activities, even though an experienced brahmana. Sri Madhavendra Puri, a great devotee and acharya in the line of the devotees, says,
Bhadramastu bhavato bho snanam namo bho devah pitarascha tarpana vidhau naham kshamah kshamyatam yatra kvapi nishadya yadava kulotam sasya kamsa dvisha smaram smaram agham bharami tad alam manyeki anyename.
O my prayer 3 times a day, all glories to you. O bathing, offer my obeisances unto you. O demigods, O forefathers, please excuse me for my inability to offer you my respect. Now, wherever I sit, I can remember the great descendant of the Yadu dynasty, Krishna, the enemy of Kamsa, and thereby I can free myself from all sinful bondage. I think this is sufficient for me. The Vedic rites and rituals are imperative for neophytes. Comprehending all kinds of prayer 3 times a day, taking a bath early in the morning, offering respects to the forefathers, etc. But when one is fully in Krishna consciousness and is engaged in his transcendental loving service, one becomes indifferent to all these regulative principles because he has already attained perfection. If one can reach the platform of understanding by service to the Supreme Lord Krishna, he is no longer to execute different types of penances and sacrifices as recommended in revealed scriptures. And similarly, if one has not understand that the purpose of the Vedas is to reach Krishna and simply engage in the rituals, etc., then he is uselessly wasting time in such engagements. Persons in Krishna consciousness transcends the limit of Shabda Brahma, or the range of the Vedas. The range of the Vedas and Upanishads. Text 53.
Yadasthasyati nishala samadhav achala buddhis tada yogam avapsyasi.
When your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of Vedas, and when it remains fixed in the trance of self-realization, when you will have attained the divine consciousness, then you will have attained the divine consciousness. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. To say that one is in samadhi is to say that one has fully realized Krishna consciousness. That is, one in full samadhi has realized Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan. The highest perfection of self-realization is to understand that one is eternally the servitor of Krishna and that one's only business is to discharge one's duties in Krishna consciousness. A Krishna-conscious person or unflinching devotee of the Lord should not be disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, nor be engaged in fruitive activities for promotion to the heavenly kingdom. In Krishna consciousness, one comes directly into communion with Krishna, and thus all directions from Krishna may be understood in the transcendental state. One is sure to achieve results by such activities and attain conclusive knowledge. One has only to carry out the orders of Krishna on his representative, the spiritual master. Text 54. Arjuna said, O Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus mere transcendence? How does he speak and what is his language? How does he sit and how does he work?
Комментарий Шрила
Purport of
Прабхупады.
Srila Prabhupada.
Как человека,
As there are
занимающего
symptoms
то
for
или иное
each and
положение
every
в
man
обществе, можно
in terms of
распознать по
his particular
определенным признакам.
situation,
Так и
similarly
человека,
one who is
наделенного
Krishna
сознанием
conscious has his
Кришны,
particular
можно
nature,
распознать по
talking,
тому,
working,
как он
thinking,
говорит, ходит, думает и так
feeling,
далее.
etc.
Соответствующие
As a rich
признаки
man has his symptoms by
позволяют
which he is known
отличить
as a rich
богатство
man,
от
as
богатого
a
от
diseased
бедного,
man has his
здорового
symptoms
от
by
больного
which he is
и
known as
ученого от
diseased,
неуча.
one man
Точно так же
has his
человека,
symptoms.
обладающего
So a man
божественным
in
сознанием
transcendental
или сознанием
consciousness of
Кришны
Krishna has
узнают
specific symptoms
по
in
тому, как
various
он ведет
dealings.
себя в
One
разных ситуациях.
can know his
Эти
specific
признаки
symptoms from the
перечислены
Bhagavad-Gita.
в последующих стихах Бхагавад-гиты.
Most important is how the man in Krishna consciousness speaks. Speech is the most important quality for any man. It is said that a fool is indiscovered as long as he does not speak. And certainly a well-dressed fool cannot be identified unless he speaks. But as soon as he speaks, he reveals himself at once. The immediate symptom of Krishna conscious man is that he speaks only for Krishna and of matters relating to him. Other symptoms then automatically follow as stated below. Text 55. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties of desires for sense gratification which arise from mental concoction, and when his mind thus purified finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in a pure transcendental consciousness. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. The Bhagavatam affirms that any person who is fully in Krishna consciousness or devotional service of the Lord has all the good qualities of the great sages, whereas a person who is not so transcendentally situated has no good qualifications, because he is sure to be taking refuge in his own mental concoctions. Consequently, it is rightly said herein that one has to give up all kinds of sense desire manufactured by mental concoction. Artificially, such sense desires cannot be stopped, but if one is engaged in Krishna consciousness, then automatically sense desires subside without extraneous efforts. Therefore, one has to engage himself in Krishna consciousness without hesitation, for this devotional service will instantly help one onto the platform of transcendental consciousness. The highly developed soul always remains satisfied in himself by realizing himself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord. Such a transcendentally situated person has no sense desire resulting from petty materialism. Rather, he remains always happy to his natural position of eternally serving the Supreme Lord. Text 56.
Sukheshu vigatas prihaha vitaraga bhaya krodha sthitadhir munir uchyate того.
One who is not disturbed in mind eats the threefold miseries, or elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger, is called a sage of steady mind. Purport to Srila Prabhupada. The word Muni means one who can agitate his mind in various ways for mental speculation without coming to a factual conclusion. It is said that every Muni has a different angle of vision, and unless a Muni differs from other Munis, he cannot be called a Muni in the strict sense of the term. Нашав Ришир Ясяма Там Набхинам. Mahabharata, Vana Parva, 313, 117. But a seated here Muni, as mentioned herein by the Lord, is different from an ordinary Muni. The seated here Muni is always in Krishna consciousness, for he has exhausted all his business of creative speculation. He is called Prashanta Nikshesha Mano Radhantara. Shtotra Ratna 43. Or one who has surpassed the stage of mental speculations and has come to the conclusion that Lord Shri Krishna or Vasudeva is everything. Vasudevah Sarvamati Samahatma Sudurlabha. He is called the Muni fixed in mind. Such a fully Krishna conscious person is not at all disturbed by the onslaughts of the threefold miseries, for he accepts all miseries at the mercy of the Lord, thinking himself only worthy of more trouble due to his past misdeeds. And he sees that his miseries, by the grace of the Lord, are minimized to the lowest. Similarly, when he is happy, he gives credit to the Lord, thinking himself unworthy for the happiness. He realizes that it is due only to the Lord's grace that he is in such a comfortable condition and able to render better service to the Lord. And for the service of the Lord, he is always daring and active, and is not influenced by attachment or aversion. Attachment means accepting things for one's own sense gratification, and detachment is the absence of such sensual attachment. But one fixed in Krishna consciousness has neither attachment nor detachment, because his life is dedicated in the service of the Lord. Consequently, he is not at all angry even when his attempts are unsuccessful. Success or no success, a Krishna conscious person is always steady in his determination. Text 57.
Nabhinandati nadveshti tasya pragya pratisthita.
In the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. Purport of Srila Prabhupada. There is always some upheaval in the material world, which may be good or evil. One who is not agitated by such material upheavals, who is unaffected by good and evil, is to be understood to be fixed in Krishna consciousness. As long as one is in the material world, there is always the possibility of good and evil, because this world is full of duality. But one who is fixed in Krishna consciousness is not affected by good and evil, because he is simply concerned with Krishna, who is all good, absolute. Such consciousness in Krishna situated one in a perfect transcendental position called technically samadhi. We stopped here. There is some verses. We stay for next time. We finished with the text 57. This is very good time for us. We are learning for the science of communication. First, we start with understanding ourselves.
открывает Арджуне. Они
Krishna
как раз предназначены
reveals the
для
knowledge
любого человека, который
to
ставит
Arjuna,
свою
and all
цель
this knowledge
познать
are
себя.
to everybody.
Вот здесь
And
как
here
бы, как будто бы многие уже и познали себя, да, что мы души.
it looks
Но
like
мы читаем сейчас и
everybody
видим,
understands
что-то новое находим для себя.
himself,
Другими
but
словами,
every
мы не
time
просто
we
что-то новое
find
находим.
something new
На
for
самом деле
ourselves.
мы
It
закрепляем
means that we
те
just
связующие,
fixed on
скажем так, сегменты нашей духовной жизни, которые по-прежнему
and
слабы
connect
еще.
all the segments of
Например,
our
вера слабая,
spiritual life. For
а у
example,
кого-то знаний может быть
sometimes we
недостаточно,
have
сил у кого-то нету,
faith
полных
not
прям
so
сил
strong.
действовать в полной
Sometimes
мере
we
в
have
сознании Кришны. И вот
feel
читая вот это произведение, мы чувствуем,
weak
что
in
какие-то
our
аспекты
spiritual life, and reading
наших
this
взаимоотношений с Богом и вообще в процессе
purpose,
самосознания
we feel
закрепляются,
that some
крепче становятся.
aspects of our spiritual life
Поэтому
become more
рекомендуется
strong.
читать
That
Бхагавад-гиту каждый день.
that's why this is
Лекарство нужно употреблять каждый день.
spiritual knowledge
Болезнь очень
is
глубокая,
good
очень
for
тяжелая,
everybody to read.
материалистичная. Так мы всегда находимся в опасности,
We are
что
always
опять мы можем ввергнуться в этот
in a
круговорот
danger. We can
рождения,
come back in
старости,
this
болезни и смерти.
material world, in
Но
the
тот, кто читает Бхагавад-гиту, становится
miseries of the
бессмертным,
world. And
потому что
when we read
постигает, во-первых, себя
this
как
purpose,
душу,
we
как
become
минимум.
eternal and
Спасибо всем большое
avoid
за это чтение. Желаю всем хорошего
dangers of the
настроения
material
сегодня.
world. I wish everybody a
встречи.
good mood. Have a good day. See you next time.